Hi, Misha here, and I've done a number of videos on Russian MiG fighters, and put out one on the SU-27 and the SU-35 from Sukhoi, both of which are air superiority fighters. Well, the 27 is a traditional air superiority. The 35 is more of a multi-role, but still high-performance fighters. This time, though, we're going to kind of change gears. This is anything but a high-performance fighter. This is the SU-25. And then we'll look at the SU-34. The 25 is a close support, ground attack, strike aircraft. Often referred to as a flying tank, and probably most Americans would think of it as the Russian version of the A-10 Warthog. Well, this dates back to 1968. At that time, looking at combat in Vietnam and elsewhere, the Soviet Union decided it needed a close-in support fixed-wing aircraft. So in a lot of ways doing a job like a helicopter, but with the benefits of a fixed wing. And it looked at all aircraft currently in production in the Soviet Union at the time, and even the aircraft on the drawing board, and really none of them were suited for this. We had high altitude, high speed interceptors. We had lower altitude, very nimble, maneuverable fighters, and even fighter bombers. The MiG-21 was well established. The 23 was coming online. The 25 was coming online. But no, they really weren't doing what they desired. So in '69, a competition was announced to design this new close support craft, and Sukhoi went up against other Russian aircraft manufacturers such as Yak and MiG, and very quickly showed that they had what was looked for. So they were declared the winner. They quickly started working on a prototype. It was mostly ready by 1974. Took its first flight in 1975. And production was arranged actually in Georgia. And this started to roll off the lines in 1978. The SU-25. The Russians call it the Rook, and to NATO it was the Frogfoot. And a high-performance vessel, this is not. End to end, we're about 50 feet long, and wingtip to wingtip, we're a little over 47 feet, so we're nearly a box. It has 11 hard points, 5 on each wing, and then 1 under the fuselage. It was expected to carry air-to-surface missiles, bombs, even some air-to-air missiles for defense, It had a 30mm cannon on board, and it could mount 2 additional cannons, 23mm each, on the wings, so a total of 3 cannon if needed. It had 2 engines. It had a very interesting cockpit in the sense that it was a trade-off. Visibility, frankly, sucked. The pilot sat very deep inside. It was cramped. There was no rear visibility except via periscope. But the trade-off was it was armored. And this whole craft was armored. And so it could take a beating and either keep flying or at least return home. It was subsonic. It could not even quite reach Mach 0.8, so actually slower than the old MiG-15. Its maximum altitude at ceiling, when fully armed, was only about 16,000 feet. And if it was lightened up, didn't have all the ordnance, it could get over 20,000, maybe 22,000 feet. So it wasn't a performance craft. It was set up and designed to be exactly what it needed to be. And that's why this is still in service and even ostensibly production to this very day. These became very famous in Afghanistan. The Soviet Union first deployed these there in 1981 and really upped the numbers by 1984. And they were assigned for attacking mountain fortifications or troops. They were also giving bunker buster type bombs, concrete penetrator type bombs. And were very effective at that. On the other hand, because of their relatively slow flight and lack of extreme maneuverability, they were vulnerable to surface-to-air missiles. And over a dozen would be shot down, with another 8 or 9 or 10 destroyed on the ground. So they would suffer losses in Afghanistan. But on the other hand, they were also called upon to do many missions. In 1987, Iraq acquired a good number of SU-25s and used them against Iran. And then again attempted to use them in 1991 during the Gulf War. Not very effectively. Most were destroyed on the ground. At least half a dozen fled over the border to Iran. And many more were shot down by American F-15 fighters. Russia has continued to use these, for example, in Chechnya. Also, they have seen use recently in Syria. They have built over 1,000 of these. It's still officially in the catalog as a production craft, but of course it is aging by this point. As far as the Hobby Master model here, is all the rest. It is 172 diecast. And really one of my favorites. All the ordnance pegged in very easily. It all just went together nice and tight. And it's just a really neat, interesting, and very Soviet craft. So definitely one to look into if you ever get into these. Well, with that said, what about this big old guy here? The SU-34, very aptly named by NATO, Fullback. This is one of the heaviest, largest, most impressive 1/72 scale models that I am aware of from Hobby Master. It is quite something else. It is essentially a big SU-27. Dimensions are really about the same. Well, where did this all begin? In the very late 80s, 88, 89, they wanted to make a strike fighter bomber version of the SU-27 to replace the aging SU-24 and to be a little more versatile and useful. They actually had a prototype ready to go pretty early. What they did, they started with the SU-27K, the Navy version, and then they went to the SU-27K UB, which was the training version, two-seater, and they started from that point for this new model. And you can see these canards here are kind of a leftover from the old SU-27K days. And so the earliest prototype was actually just a modified naval trainer. Well, the program was shelved in 1989, again, the Soviet Union ending and so on and so forth. However, a very, very early prototype, which was, again, basically just a modified SU-27K, flew in 1990. So work would keep on, but at a low pace. More prototypes would fly throughout 93, 94, getting a little closer every time, and then finally in 1995, the designation SU-34 would be assigned, with SU-32 being kind of the export foreign customer variant. Even then, it took a lot of time. 96, another prototype flew. Finally, around 2004, the first kind of pre-production SU-34s were picked up by the Russian military, really just for evaluation, frankly. And then finally, in 2006, this would go into serial production, and the military would place orders in 2008, 2012, so on and so forth. This would first be used in the conflict in Georgia by Russia, and then of course would be used in more recent conflicts such as Syria, where it's become quite famous. The idea is that this will replace SU-24s and some SU-25s, and then because this is a more modern advanced craft, they can replace, they only need, one of these to replace, 3 or 4 other aircraft in service. Originally, the order was for 125 aircraft, but some have said that will probably go up to 200. Either way, they seem quite happy with this craft's performance, and as they should be. Again, it is an SU-27, just heavily modified. It has even more hard points, up to 15. Still has the 30mm cannon. It is very much geared in all of its electronics for ground attack. It's also designed for long duration with aerial refueling. And that leads us actually to one of its neatest features, its cockpit. This is more like a cockpit on a real bomber, full-size bomber. It has two crew in tandem. The pilot and commander is on our left, and our navigator and weapons officer is on our right. And they, to some extent, share instruments, meaning they don't have to be replicated. And because this is meant for long-duration flights, there is a small refreshment, like galley, place to prepare a beverage or two, some, basic food. And of course, when you have a galley, you're also going to need a toilet. So there is a small aircraft type toilet in the back here. And there's even a provision, if it's a very long flight, for one officer to be able to sleep kind of on the floor in a small little walkway in between the two seats while the other officer pilots the craft. So with aerial refueling, in theory this could stay aloft for quite some time, and has done so. These have been quite effective in Syria, using bunker buster type bombs. They are configured primarily as a strike craft, so we've got air-to-surface missiles, smart bombs, rockets, but this is still a Sukhoi. It can act as a fighter if needed, so it can have air-to-air missiles. Unlike the SU-25, this one still can achieve Mach supersonic. It can go about 1.8, so not as fast as the others, but still respectable. And it can achieve a ceiling of just under 50,000 feet. So again, not utmost, but still quite respectable. For pilot comfort, the cockpit is pressurized, and oxygen is not needed up to about 32,000 feet or so. So you don't have to have your people in sealed pressure suits all the time, which could get really uncomfortable. Basically, the advancements on this craft have to do with its weapons systems. In other ways, it's pretty conventional. It does have a fully armored cockpit, like the SU-25, and the rest of it is reinforced as well. Maybe not quite to the extent of the 25, but then again, this is a much faster and more maneuverable craft, so it shouldn't be taking as much heat. I don't know, I just found this one very interesting and attractive. This is in the traditional Russian paint scheme, which was seen on these when they first went to Syria. Hobbymaster has also released a version in the more modern kind of pewter gray, like on the SU-35. So if you're more the modern Russian Federation look, they offer it both ways. And really, yeah, this one's benefit is just how versatile it is. And that's really about it, folks. Oh, by the way, the cannon on board, the 30mm cannon, has an expanded capacity of 180 rounds, too. Not a huge amount more than standard, but hey, every bit counts, right? But, actually, this one just came in today. I've been waiting to do this video till it got here, because I don't know, like I said, I just like it. I think because it's crossing that line between being a traditional fighter and more of a light bomber. And I find the compact yet livable, very livable cockpit very interesting as well. This model itself is probably my heaviest Hobbymaster because the enlarged fuselage is all metal, and I like it. All the ordnance pegged on. We got one of the bombs on the underside of the fuselage is a little loose. I might try to tinker with that a bit, but everything else clipped in really nice, easy, didn't fight me. Really, all these Sukhois were pretty easy to work with. Of course, a lot of these are newer molds, newer models too. So it seems like as time goes by, they get better and better. Well, folks, that's not all the SUs, of course. I'd like to do an SU-24, but Hobbymaster doesn't do one. The only ones really out there are caliber wings, and by every report I've heard of, which is like 3 or 4 people to be fair, but what I've heard is they're just really delicate. They come in broken or pieces, not glued properly, and I don't want a project like that, unfortunately. Maybe one day they'll either fix their pattern or someone else will pick up the SU-24 and I can share one of those with you. And of course you have older ones like the SU-7 15-22, but I don't really know of anyone who does a 1/72 scale die-cast model of those. But I thought this was a nice assortment. Any questions or comments? As always, welcome them below. And as I mentioned in the first video, trying a promo code over at Pete's Collectibles. We'll put a link in the description. If you go there and use Misha, M-I-S-H-A, you can get 15% off and reduced or free shipping. So, you know, if you're bored, curious about what maybe getting one of these would be like, might be a way to get you into one for a little less. These things are god-awful expensive on Amazon, but that's not indicative. If you buy them new from the actual distributors and stuff, they're quite a bit cheaper. I don't know why prices on Amazon are so ridiculous. Well, folks, it's late. I think I'm going to head off. Appreciate you tuning in. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time.